Madhuri Sondiji, my dear friend Sikyong Sri Lobsang Sangai, all the trustees of the foundation, the most distinguished audience present in front of me, dear friends. I primarily agreed to come to this event because of my great respect for Sri M.L. Sondhiji. I have never met him, but I used to read his writings, some of the compilations he had done in his lifetime. I regard him as one of the great scholars of India's diplomacy and foreign policy, and one who belonged to the school of thought to which I also belong. And also generally my respect for Madam Madhuriji, who is continuing to carry that mantle after his demise. Otherwise, for a practicing politician of the ruling party like me, T-word is not allowed. Probably one of the reasons why I was asked to come and participate in this program was that I had authored a book on the India-China relations, but that was before I joined the party. I had the luxury of being frank, open and candid. But once you are in politics and once you are a member of the ruling party, you have to tread the path very cautiously. Friends, I firmly believe that this question that we are trying to address today should have been addressed 5-6 decades ago. Trying to address it after 6 decades with a view of what happened 6 decades ago can create problems to us. India and China, what was the kind of relationship they had at the time of what all happened to Tibet, and what has happened in the last 5 decades between the two countries, which has had its own bearing on the question of Tibet also. So these things need to be taken into account. Historically speaking, great injustices have been done. We were a part of those injustices. We cannot claim that we have not done anything. In fact, we should agree that we have not done anything at the time, which we should have done. One biggest problem that I see in this relationship between India and China is that while we are two big old civilizations, we are culturally very different. Without proper appreciation of the cultural roots, cultural moorings of each of our civilizations and societies, you or we cannot find any solution to any of these problems, not just Tibet alone. Even the problem of Doklam, as late as Doklam. Challenge is we look at this relationship from a particular perspective, which is a product of our own cultural upbringing. The other side has a totally different cultural outlook. One of the major challenges for us probably is to develop a proper strategic culture in this country. I used to think that we don't have one, especially after the independence. That was only based on my understanding or my reading and experience of reading based knowledge of our international relations. I used to think that we don't have that strategic culture in our country. But in the last 3.5 years, I got convinced about it. I was reading Mohan Malik's book on India-China relations. He talks about this aspect of lack of strategic culture in our country. They have built that great China Wall. I don't know how many kilometers long it is. Some say it is about 4,000 kilometers long. It took about 1,700 years to complete that great China Wall. Many of you might have seen it. I had the opportunity to see it. A very strong, sturdy structure they built just to protect China from the northern invaders. And Mohan Malik raises this question. India historically had faced aggressions from its northwestern borders through one mountain pass called Khyber Pass. Why did it not occur to any Indian king that if I just simply build a wall there, close that pass, there won't be any aggressions on India? This is where that important question of strategic thinking comes in. I have read the Chinese history a little bit. I have read about Sun Tzu. There was a reference in my introduction. I mentioned it in my book also. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu makes a very important statement that the art of war is an art in deception. Deception is at the core of any war that you engage in. Now, we have a history in which we have had our own wars. The greatest war that we can talk about in our Indian history is the Mahabharata war. The very first statement in Mahabharata war is Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre. The statement begins here in the battleground is that this is a battleground. But it's a battle which has to be fought on dharmic principles. It has to be Dharma Kshetra. The whole concept of war in one culture is deception. In another culture is dharmic. It has to be righteous war. So much difference exists in the thinking itself, at the core cultural belief systems itself. So unless we understand the other side, their thinking, I'm afraid we cannot really find any lasting solutions to problems. We can still try and find temporary solutions to problems. China is our neighbor. You cannot choose your neighbors. But India's history is very peculiar. We have chosen our neighbors. We have picked up our neighbors. We have created neighbors where they didn't exist. Pakistan is our own creation. Most difficult neighbor. China historically was definitely in our neighborhood, but you cannot say that it was our neighbor in terms of sharing borders and all in between. We used to have Tibet as an independent kingdom. Just as we have allowed Pakistan to rise and become a neighbor, a most difficult neighbor in 1947, by late 50s we have allowed China also to become a neighbor. So this saying that you cannot choose your neighbors, probably that is true, but you can create neighbors, which we have done. Now, having created neighbors, we also should have learned to live with them. The unfortunate history of last 5 decades suggests that probably we have not learned to live with them. For you to learn with your neighbor, you should know who he is. Now, I remember in 62, when Mao decided to issue orders to his army sometime in August 62 for launching the war, Zhou Enlai asks him, "Sir, please think once again, because we have signed that Panchsheel agreement with Nehru, which talked about peaceful coexistence of our two countries, besides many other things." Mao winks and asks Zhou Enlai to convey to Nehru that what India and China should practice is not peaceful coexistence, but armed coexistence. Until then, we were in the belief that we probably have to lead a peaceful life together. So much so that we didn't ask for any support weapons from any other country. What was worse was that when countries came forward to offer the support, we didn't know what to ask from them. And finally, when we are almost into the war, India sends a list to USA, and historians tell us that this list had to be rewritten by the Americans. It was so clumsy, the list was, that they had to redo it in order to understand what actually is the requirement in India. So somehow we have a problem that we have never bothered to understand our neighbor properly. We are a romantic nation, and our foreign policy is also driven largely by romantic ideas. Since I am a member of the ruling party, I cannot say much about it, but I am a firm believer that romanticism should end. It has to be a pragmatic policy. Talking about pragmatic policy, that brings me to the question of Tibet. It has to be approached today in a very pragmatic way. Right or wrong, as a nation, we have given commitments to China about its status. The last time that we gave a commitment was in 2003. Again, at that time, it was a BJP-led government under Prime Minister Vajpayee. People had different opinions about it. But nations have to honor the commitments that they give to the neighbors, to the other countries. I always believed that the path chosen by His Holiness of engaging with the Chinese leadership, trying to find some kind of a meaningful, mutually acceptable and beneficial settlement to this issue of Tibet, is the best available option today. I'm sure the Tibetan leadership under some Lobsang will agree with this, that the path of negotiations should continue. How to engage with China, they know better, because they have been doing it for at least 6 centuries now. There are difficulties, there are intricacies, but I am sure the Tibetan leadership understands it well. As far as we are concerned, as a government, in the last 3.5 years, we have been trying to better our bilateral relations with China. until the advent of this millennium, until the end of last century, the obsession of the common man in India used to be India-Pakistan. Pakistan used to be the obsession. No longer. The obsession today is China. Everybody talks about China. Maintaining good relations with an important neighbor like China is definitely a matter of priority for Government of India. I see a hope in this relationship for one important reason, that we have two heads of state, President Xi Jinping in China and Prime Minister Modi in India, who are both very strong leaders with firm commitments. Fortunately, both enjoy personal goodwill, good rapport. After the latest party congress, everybody gives us to a feeling that President Xi has emerged much more stronger after the last party congress. So a strong leadership in both the countries should help in strengthening the bilateral relations, strengthening the mutual understanding, but also in the process help in addressing several issues. That includes the border dispute between the two countries and the question of Tibetans living in India, more than 100,000 of them. The day they arrived in India, we gave a solemn commitment that they will be our guests. They continue to be our honored guests. We treat them with utmost love and respect. A community committed to peace, committed to Buddhist ideals. We have great respect for the Tibetans living in India. Government of India is extending all support, whatever is possible, for managing the affairs of the Tibetan people here. But as we gave that commitment, the Tibetan side also has given a commitment to India that they will remain peaceful, law-abiding citizens here, which they continue to do here. And the efforts that the Tibetan leadership is making in finding a suitable solution to this crisis, this not exactly crisis, this question of future of Tibet, wherever it is required. Although at the moment it is between the Tibetan administration, CTA and the Chinese leadership, but wherever it is required, I'm sure the Indian people, Indian nation will stand by them. With these few words, I thank Madam Sondhi for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. And I thank all of you. I'm sure you would have understood my constraints. Thank you.